Find the mean from a frequency table. Now let's remind ourselves that the mean is the sum of all the numbers, we add them all together, and then we divide by the total frequency. Well, that's really good for small data sets, but what if we have these large data sets and they're in a frequency table? Then what do? Well, we take the value and we multiply it by the frequency for each value. We add them all together and we still divide by the total frequency. So the idea is very similar. Let's jump in. Now I want to talk first about why this works. So if we look at this, right, the value of 6 has a frequency of 9. That means 6 is here 9 times. So we could add 6 together 9 times, or mathematically, we could just multiply 6 times 9, right? That's why this works. Because when I say, okay, my first step is to take x times the frequency. Okay, so 6 times 9 is 54. 7 times 14 is 98. 8 times 7 is 56. 9 times 18 is 162. And 10 times 4 is 40. All right, so this is our first step, is to multiply the value times the frequency. Step 2 is to add those all together. So when I add 54 plus 98 plus 56 plus 162 plus 40, I get a value of 410. So that would be the same as if I added every number together in the data set, right? So step 2 is to add all of those together. Step 3, we need to find our total frequency. So I go to my frequency column and I add. So 9 plus 14 plus 7 plus 18 plus 4. Well, when I add those together, I get 52. So I now have the total of all of my values times the frequency, and I have the total frequency. So to find the mean, we're going to take the sum of all of them, so 410, and divide by the total frequency of 52. When I divide those, I get 7.8846, and it goes on and on and on. Our directions say round to the nearest hundredths. That's 2 places past the decimal. So I look at the 4, and 4 tells me to round down, so my mean is 7 88 Okay, that's great, but what if there are intervals in the frequency table? Well, find the midpoint. So for the interval, we will find the midpoint, and then we'll use that as our new value. So we say, okay, the midpoint is kind of like the average of the two, and so we can say, well, we're just going to use this as kind of our estimate, okay? So we're going to use the frequency table to find the mean, round to the nearest hundredth. So you can see we're given intervals in our left column. The first interval is 2 to 8. Okay, well, we need to find the midpoint. So I'm going to give myself a new column here. And we're going to find the midpoint of each one, which is the average. So for the first one, I'm going to take 2 plus 8. So we take the low end of the interval and the high end of the interval, and there are 2 numbers, so we divide by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my midpoint for the first one is 5. The next one, 9 plus 15 divided by 2. Well, that's 24 divided by 2, which is 12. The next one is 16 plus 22 divided by 2, which is 38 divided by 2, which is 19. Now at this point, you should notice a pattern. 5 to 12, I added 7. 12 to 19, I add 7. Yes, that is how it will always work. So if I add 7 more, I get 26. If I add 7 more, I get 33. If I add 7 more, I get 40. And now I have my midpoints. So it does work that if you find the first 1 or 2, then you have your midpoint. So now we say, okay, now I'm going to take my midpoint and multiply by the frequency, and now it's just like the example we just did. We're using the midpoint as our value. So let's go ahead and run down the multiplication. 4 times 5 is 20. 8 times 12 is 96. 7 times 19 is 133. 6 times 26 is 156. 10 times 33 is 330. And 2 times 40 is 80. So again, that's step 1. Well, I guess in this case it's step 2, but it's step 1 from what we did before. Next, we're going to add all of those together. So 20 plus 96 plus 133 plus 156 plus 330 plus 80 gives me 815. Next, I need the total frequency. So 4 plus 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 10 plus 2 gives me 37. So then I can take 815 divided by 37 to get the mean. When I do that, I end up with 22.027. It goes on and on and on. Rounding to the nearest hundredth means I look at the 7. 7 tells me to round up. So 22.03 is my mean. Now, one thing I didn't say before, but your mean should be somewhere in the middle of your numbers, right? So 22.3 is right in here, right in the middle, which is good. In my last example, let me just jump back real quick, my mean was 7.88, which is about right here. Again, that's great. That's what you want. If I would have found the mean for this particular example to be like 18, that doesn't work because my numbers don't even go up that high. So you want to make sure that your mean is somewhere within the range of numbers that you have.